Sirens, smoke, screams. The parliament of Nepal is in flames. Young people run through the streets of Kathmandu. The police fire tear gas, and in the midst of the confusion, people shout, "We won! Freedom!" It's the kind of scene that gives you chills. An entire nation engulfed in flames, quite literally. And this whole situation began due to just one click. A government decision that seemed small, but in less than 38 hours, it ignited a revolution that overthrew the president, the prime minister, and left Nepal in chaos. Prepare yourself, because in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you step by step how this story exploded, and you will understand why the entire world is now looking at Nepal. 1. The trigger. Nepal. For those who skipped geography class, it's that small country wedged between India and China. It's like the thin neighbor at a table, stuck between two hefty individuals competing for room. Now that you know its location, I'll tell you how the whole conflict began. It all starts with a simple click. On September 4th, Nepal's government decided to block almost every network: Facebook, YouTube, X, WhatsApp, Reddit. The justification? They said it was to fight fake news and require everyone to register with ID. In practical terms, it was like pulling the plug on the public square. And guess who felt the repercussions first? Generation Z students, with backpacks on and books in hand, poured out of classrooms and straight into the streets. The internet blockade turned into fuel. Memes, hashtags, anime flags, yes, even One Piece joined the protest. Everything became a symbol, but the cabinet overlooked one crucial detail. When you try to silence the internet, you amplify the streets. A tweet turned into a shout. A thread became a march. And the reason wasn't just, "I want to post memes." The powder keg was already full. Unemployment over 20%, rampant corruption, and famous Nepo babies showing off private jets and imported cars while most can barely afford rice. The internet blockade was simply the last straw. And this isn't a new issue either. Nepal was an absolute monarchy for over 200 years. Only in 2008 did it become a secular democratic republic. Sounds nice on paper, but since then politics has turned into a UFC ring. Communists, social democrats, socialists, monarchists, everyone vying for power. The result? Perpetual instability. So when the government imposed the internet blockade, it wasn't just unpopular, it was the last straw for an already rotten system. Suddenly, Kathmandu looked like a live feed. Freedom posters, phones broadcasting, humor and indignation going hand in hand. And that's when I got a strong sense of déjà vu. I've heard similar suggestions in Brazil. If it happened here, would the reaction be the same? Or would we just quietly accept it? Let's be real. A politician flaunting luxury while people sweat on crowded buses. Does that remind you of anyone? Or am I seeing a replay? 2. The streets erupt in chaos. Initially, it seemed like just another student protest. Young people leaving class in their uniforms, holding up signs against censorship and corruption. But as soon as the police showed up, the protest march turned into a war zone. First came the shouting, then the pushing. In minutes, Kathmandu had turned into a makeshift battlefield. Public buildings in flames, fences torn down, thick clouds of tear gas filling the streets. Anyone who's ever breathed it in describes it as feeling like pepper and mustard burning right in your throat. And in the midst of the chaos, there was also solidarity. Strangers helping strangers, people washing each other's eyes with water bottles, phones broadcasting everything live like it was a reality show. It was chaos, but it was also humanity. Now, imagine this in Brazil. The average Brazilian can't stand onion smell on the subway. Imagine facing tear gas. You'd see people doing dances on TikTok with the hashtag crying challenge. But then a clear line was crossed. Up until that point, it was rocks, fire, and gas. But when the gunshots started echoing in Kathmandu, there was no turning back. 20 young people dead, hundreds injured. And one scene became a symbol. A bloody shoe left on the pavement, spreading worldwide with the hashtag Bloody Shoe Nepal. That made it abundantly clear it wasn't merely a protest, it was collective mourning. And the heaviest part is, many of those young people were in a classroom just hours before. Now, they've become martyrs of a revolution broadcast live. And so I ask, if the police here opened fire on students, what would the reaction be? Would we truly unite, or just post outrage from the couch with a black filter on Instagram? 3. Government falls. After the street bloodshed, the domino effect began. The first to fall was the Interior Minister, who tried to pose as a hero by taking the blame and resigning. But it fueled the crowd to tighten their siege even more, rather than calming things. Right after, the Prime Minister also stepped down, and he wasn't the only one to do so. Even the President threw in the towel, along with half a dozen ministers who swiftly ran to hide in barracks and military bases. The chaos was so immense that the army shut down the international airport, grounded all flights, and virtually imposed an informal state of siege. What was the outcome? In less than 48 hours, Nepal no longer had a government. It was as though someone had overturned a chessboard, with pieces flying every which way, and no one knew who truly held power in the country. And I just can't help but draw a comparison. In Brazil, a politician clings to their position as if it were a life raft in a shipwreck. Meanwhile, in Nepal, the president, prime minister, and ministers all fell in 38 hours. Here, in 38 hours, they only managed to approve their own salary increases. With the government in collapse, the people decided to take what was left, the symbols. The gates of the parliament were torn down, the building was engulfed in flames, and Nepali flags flew from fire trucks as if it were a World Cup final. It presented a surreal contrast. On one side, there was black smoke, glass shattering, and buildings engulfed in flames. On the other, young people laughing, sharing water bottles, helping strangers get up. Amidst the destruction, humanity remained. This was no mere protest, it was a victory ritual. The police forces retreated, the army disappeared, and the young people shouted, "We won!" as they beat their chests, cried, and danced amidst the ashes. And I was thinking, here in Brazil, when people invade public buildings and paint a statue with lipstick, it becomes a viral meme and loses its impact within a few days. But that's not the case in Nepal. The fire wasn't merely physical, it was a strong warning. The country will never be the same. Fourth, who is in command now? And then came the question no one could answer. Who is in command now? The Prime Minister fell, the President resigned, ministers disappeared like background actors in a bad film, and Nepal entered a power vacuum. Constitutionally, it's a parliamentary system. It would be time to reorganize the coalitions and choose a new leader. However, in practical terms, the parliament building was quite literally ablaze. There was no assembly, no voting, no legitimate authority. The military even tried to hold things together, closing the airport and blocking the roads, but they had absolutely no legitimacy to govern. The country felt like a car with no driver going downhill, and everybody was praying it wouldn't crash into a wall. That's where the real danger is. When there is no government, any group can try to take power. It is a time when the populace can envision freedom, but also the ideal opportunity for opportunists to emerge. While smoke was still rising from the parliament, another war began, the war of narratives. The government swore it had implemented an internet blockade to protect the people from fake news. But the young people replied, "No, you just wanted to silence us." And of course, whenever there's chaos, the same old story plays out. The United States on one side and China on the other, each feigning assistance, yet in reality, only seeking to draw Nepal into their sphere of influence. The nation, wedged between these two great powers, resembled that impoverished acquaintance no one invites to a party, yet everyone seeks out when they need a favor. The irony is that the trigger was just a click, but the spark only caught because the kindling had been piling up for years. Corruption, nepotism, joblessness, inequality. Social media became the scapegoat, but in truth, the fire was poised to ignite for a very long time. 5. The price of revolt. Victory has a bitter taste when the bill comes. Nepal woke up to burned buildings, destroyed shops, cancelled flights, and tourism, the country's main source of income, at a standstill. The overcrowded hospitals served as a stark reminder that every shattered brick came at the cost of real human lives. Economists talk about billions in losses, but the biggest deficit isn't in the wallet, it's in trust. Because rebuilding a building is easy. What's hard is to rebuild faith in the government. The streets, which days before were exploding with energy, were now deserted under a curfew. The silence after the storm doesn't bring peace, only uncertainty. And none of this started suddenly. The internet blockade was just the spark. The pot had been boiling for years. Corruption, nepotism, unemployment. Children of the political elite flaunted private jets and imported cars, while the youth faced unemployment lines and wages that barely cover the basics. Over half of the youth dream of migrating abroad. And when an entire generation wants to flee their own home, revolt is just a matter of time. That's why when the police fired, they didn't just kill students. They killed the hope of an entire generation. And when a failed system does that, no pretty speech can fix it. The anger is already out of control. Or, to summarize it in a rather harsh way, a revolution does not come with a discount coupon. 6. The enduring symbols. Every revolution leaves both scars and symbols. In Nepal, these emerged quite rapidly. The most brutal one was simple: a bloody shoe left on the asphalt. An image that spoke louder than 1,000 speeches and went viral as the very cry of the generation that fell. But that wasn't the full story. There was a Nepalese flag hoisted atop a fire truck, as if the populace were proclaiming, "Now it is our moment." Ministers ran in torn suits, public buildings were ablaze, and a TV station was seized by the crowd. Each scene depicted the collapse. These symbols are important because they encapsulate pain, anger, and hope within images that no one can disregard. They unite people, telling a story that no book could ever write in the same way. When the dust settled, what remained was an uncomfortable question: what now? The parliament was in ruins, the government dissolved, and the army tried to act as a guardian, but with no direction. Nepal found itself suspended between two possible futures. On one hand, a chance for a fresh start, new elections, ending corruption, and restoring trust. On the other, the risk of deeper sinking, power struggles, repression, and chaos. Because fire is great for destroying things, but it never builds anything on its own. And that was the cruel lesson left behind in Kathmandu. To overthrow is quick, but to rebuild is another war. In the end, what remained was a surreal contrast. On one side, the parliament in ashes, black smoke, destroyed buildings. On the other, people laughing, sharing water bottles, helping strangers wash the tear gas from their eyes. A foreigner who was there summed it up perfectly. Only in Nepal can you go through a revolution, see the parliament turn to ash, and still find your motorcycle in the same place, untouched, with someone offering you water. It's surreal, but it's real. So I ask, was this a revolution or just chaos? Share your opinion in the comments. And if you've made it this far, comment Nepal in flames, so I know who survived until the end. And hey, don't leave just yet. Go ahead and click the video that's appearing on the screen because it's another one of those absurd stories you'll only find here on the channel. See you there. Thanks, and see you later.